Welcome to Philosophy Online Lecture. Today we are on philosophy and culture, and in this lecture we'll be trying to understand the concept of culture and philosophy itself, the relationship between them, and whether one can exist without the other. Okay. Uh, now, let's start by asking ourselves what is philosophy. There are various definitions of philosophy, and various scholars have their various definition because of what their perception about what philosophy is. Everyone has different perception, but I always love to use H.S. Stanleyland definition, which says philosophy is the criticism of the ideas that we live by. So, because philosophy itself look into every aspect of human life, the society, the world at large, and give a critical analysis of everything, right? So, with doing that, they ask questions, they also prefer answers, solutions, and new knowledge about them. Okay, so now uh let's another definition of philosophy to Popkin and Stroh is that philosophy is an attitude towards certain activities. Now, this is another definition that is necessary for this our discourse, because an attitude towards certain activity implies our way of life, our approach towards so many things, and this is deeply rooted in our culture. Okay, so now moving forward, uh, let's take another definition by T.U. Onwala, who said philosophy could mean the basic ideas and belief which people or a group has. Okay, so now the basic idea and belief which people or a group has, that is philosophy to T.U. Onwala, and this also has an element of culture, because when we say the ideas and belief which people have, right? Okay, we are talking about their way of life, their ideas, their knowledge about things, their conception about things, and all this wouldn't uh, be possible without understanding their culture too. Okay, so now, having understood that, that is on that aspect of philosophy. In the other sense, philosophy is also the critical and theoretical discipline that we study in order to help us shape our cultural and intellectual development. That is, philosophers or people who are interested in philosophy do that in order to help them grow intellectually, and also to help them to be able to approach various situations of life. Now, for example, one who is not a philosopher will just accept things and do things in a particular way, right? But when you are a critical thinker, you reason in everything, you are practicing the traits of a philosopher, you approach life in a very reasonable manner. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to say here. So now, moving forward, uh philosophy being what shape us mentally in order to help us to think, help us to do what? To organize our experiences in every facet of life, in religion, in social life, in our political life, in law, in history, and so on, in terms of morality too. Okay, so now when you are a philosopher, you don't just do things in a particular way. Like I said before, you ask questions about things, and that is because philosophy have helped to shape you. Okay, so now all these things that I mentioned above, maybe in terms of religion, moral, in terms of our political lifestyle, all those things are the basic elements of culture, right? So we can see that there exists a relationship between philosophy and culture, and for the fact that philosophy is the criticism of the ideas that we live by. We cannot exclude philosophy from our culture. Okay, so culture involves our knowledge, our beliefs, and laws, morals, and so on. Okay, so now that is establishing the relationship between philosophy and culture. Now, culture and African philosophy, we have philosophy on its own, right? That as what we study generally, and then we also have philosophy of various societies, uh, various individuals, people. Okay, we have Western philosophy, we have the philosophy of Epicurus, and so on. Same way do we have African philosophy. Okay, so now uh, African philosophy arose after the uh, Europeans, through their egocentric claims that we do not have a philosophy. That was what prompted a response through Afrocentrism, right? That was that statement that we do not have a philosophy was an ethnocentric downgrade of the Africans. Okay, so a man Placid Tempels in 1945. He wrote a book which is titled Bantu Philosophy. Now, this Bantu philosophy book was the foundation of various philosophical books that we have in Africa today. Okay, so now this book now help us understand various definition of philosophy by African scholars. I said this book was the foundation on which other scholars wrote books on about African philosophy. So now let's consider the definition of philosophy by Africans on what African philosophy is. Okay, so now the first definition is philosophy. African philosophy as the logic of oral tradition, and here they are saying that philosophy, African philosophy is trying to bring out the logic behind the beliefs, the proverb, folklores, and sayings of Africa. When our forefathers were giving those proverbs, when they were uh, acting in some certain way that are still being practiced to date, they did not just do that accidentally. There is a logic behind them. Okay, so now that is why this is defining African philosophy as the logic behind those wise sayings, those idioms, proverbs, and so on. Okay, now those sayings, they are capable of transmitting certain values and moral beliefs that guides us as individuals in the society. That tells us that there is a logic behind them. Okay, because for them to have been used even to date, to be practiced, right? To help us act, to help us think, to help us react to things. That implies that there's a logic behind them. Okay, that is why J.S. Mbiti gave the definition of philosophy, African philosophy rather, as the understanding, the attitude of mind, the logic and perception behind the manner in which African people think, act, or speak in different situations of life. Okay, now African philosophy can also be seen as a dispute between the traditionalists and the modernists. Now, who are the traditionalists and the modernists of African philosophy? The traditionalists are those who hold that authentic African philosophy can be only be traced to those folklores, to those stories, to those way of life of our forefathers. That is where we can find the real African philosophy. That is the position of the traditionalists, and not we trying to talk about African philosophy from the Western philosophy point of view. Right? That is the position of the traditionalists. The modernists, on the other hand, are saying that philosophy has grown out of we limiting it to the aspect of those traditional stories, and that those traditional stories, some of them are barbaric, some of them are outdated, right? Some of them are autocratic, in the sense that they are dogmatic. People are they are not relevant in this moment. Okay, so that is the position of the modernists, and that for us to talk about African philosophy, we have to apply the basic element of philosophy, which is critical and reflective thinking, right? And also putting our philosophy into writings. That is the position of the modernists. Some of the traditionalists include Plessis Tempels, G.S. Mbiti, Bolaji Idowu, and so on. In the modernist school, we have popular Professor Utoji and Bodwin. Okay, so now the modernists are saying we have to embrace science and technology. Okay, so these two schools they had various arguments, right? Now the traditionalists were even responding to the modernists by saying that it is not a must that we have a written document of our philosophy. That look at Socrates. Socrates does not have a written document of his philosophy. So why are we going to make it a necessity that for us to have a philosophy or to claim that we have a philosophy, there must be written? Okay. Now, in both schools of thought, right? That is that of the modernist and the traditionalist. We we understand that culture is a basic element of their position. Okay, now what do I mean? In both positions, the one is saying our real philosophy can be traced to our folklores and so on, our traditions and so on, Now, the modernists are saying that philosophy has taken a new shape. We have to apply critical and reflective thinking to what we find in Africa today, right? Both position has culture elements in them because the traditionalists are advocating for the real tradition, the real proverbs and so on, the way of life of Africans, just as GSMBT defined it. All those things implies culture itself. That is, the culture of Africans is what we can present as our philosophy. Now, those who are saying critical and reflective thinking of our present state also involve that they apply critical and reflective thinking into the present culture that we have in Africa today. So the two schools are based on culture of Africans today. Okay, so culture now serve as the raw material, just as Dr. Ade Bindi put it here. Now, it is clear that culture provide philosophy with the raw materials or objects of analysis. Okay, so just as I said through H.S. Stanland philosophy, that philosophy is the criticism of the ideas that we live by, we can also say that philosophy serve as a check of our culture by looking into various aspects of our culture which we considered as bad and good, using criticism and analysis of all of them, trying to reject some and trying to discover and sustain those that are relevant. Okay, so now without culture, there is nothing philosophy want to deliberate about. Yeah, okay. So now we have been able to understand that situation. Okay. Lastly, we know philosophy grew out of wonder, and what were those people wondering about? What is the ultimate reality of the universe on various issues such as metaphysics, birth and death, afterlife, the purpose of human existence, how can we acquire knowledge, epistemology, and so on. All those things are also elements of what? Culture, right? When we are asking questions about those things, we want to know how we approach life. Okay, so uh, without culture, without criticism of our culture, there's no way we can make headway in life, right? So when we criticize, when we look into it very well, philosophically, we get the answers that we are looking for. Okay, now, but if we remain dogmatic in our culture, we do not get an headway. Okay, so that is why philosophy is very, very important, and without culture, there is nothing philosophy want to deliberate about. Thank you so much for listening through. I hope you got value for your time, and please kindly subscribe and turn on post notification. God bless you.